Boys, I think it's time I let you in on a little secret. I guess it's not really that secret. I've made a few videos and points on it before on the channel. For a while now on the channel, I've been really trying to figure out the best way to create an AI-only experience. But not necessarily an AI-only experience. I think the better way I can describe it is a history simulation experience. Because that's really all we're doing with these AI-only games. We're trying to come up with funny or cool or interesting, silly stories that happen randomly. But what makes these stories so interesting that we simulate with games like Hearts of Iron or EVE or whatever it is that we don't know what's gonna happen next. So we have half of it there. We have a story that we don't know the ending to, but we're still missing something here. I think I found what that thing is. We're missing meaning and context. So when I do an every state independent game, what we're looking for in this game is cool stories, stories of redemption, stories of revenge, stories of rise and fall, etc. But the AI doesn't understand that, and it doesn't know why doing something would be cool or not. It doesn't understand that taking revenge on its rival or destroying its rival or a country being reborn out of a revolution is interesting. So I think we need to take the AI out of the AI only. But how do we do that? We can't run 50, 60 player games, especially on a game like Every State Independent that would be hundreds of players in a Hearts of Iron game. That is obviously impossible. But then I remembered something that I used to do back in early 2017. Back then, when I had a smaller YouTube channel, I would do a live stream every Friday or Saturday. We called it Stream Team. And eventually what started happening on the stream was we would open up Photoshop. And eventually what would happen on the stream is I would open up Photoshop and stream it live for everybody. In Photoshop, I would draw some random landmass, and we would use that as our proto-world or whatever we want to call it. Then the chat would tell me, hey, this is my country, put it here. I would fill up the map with the chat's countries, and then they would tell me what they're doing, like going to war or whatever. We used very simple dice websites to roll battles. It was all very small and silly. We didn't take it very seriously. But what I didn't realize is we kind of accidentally reinvented Nation RP as a concept that I wasn't really familiar with back then, but we had reinvented it on accident. Now, this wasn't a true Nation RP because people weren't really taking it seriously. It was all memes. You have countries here like Ethiopian businessmen and the Kek Empire, obviously. But it sort of turned into something that my viewers liked or hated, but we always ended up coming back to it every year. And since then, in early 2017, I've actually ran 7 of these games. They've lasted short and long periods of time. Some were done better than others. I ran these games with various success. There was the classical period of what we call Seasons 1 through 4. Season 1 was really the first game that we played in early 2017. Season 2 was sort of a sequel that we did afterwards. And Seasons 3 and 4 were extremely chaotic messes that we did sort of the year after. Now, I always kind of wanted to remake this game with a more serious tone, but keep it fun at the same time. So in 2019, we did Season 5 with a completely new map, and we banned returning nations. Season 5 lasted about 22 weeks into 2020, and it was a great success. It was very fun, and it really taught me something interesting. This tool can be used to simulate an entire planet's history, if we tried. Now, that's not what Season 5 did. Season 5 told some great stories about certain wars, and the map definitely did evolve over time. But it didn't evolve too much. Many of the parts of the map stayed the same through most of the game. And if we were to say that this is a simulation of a planet's history, that wouldn't really make sense. So, me and my friend Lunu, who helped me run Season 5, decided that we were going to recreate this mapping game, this Nation RP, but we were going to do it in a more serious tone. We made this world, and we called it Season 6. Season 6's goal was to simulate an entire world's history. Well, at least from the classical period upwards. So we had this idea where we were going to have a few large starting nations on the map, then all of the players would be able to put their starting tribes on afterwards, and the map would slowly evolve over time. Which it did and was actively evolving until the game completely collapsed. Me and Lunu didn't really see coming the problems that this game would have. We had over 100 players at one point, all wanting RP to be done with them. and me and Lunu were the only two people that could run RP. We were the only mods in the whole game. It drove us insane, and we wanted the game to be over. So the obvious lesson from this is have RP staff. Have guys that can run around and run the RP for everybody. So Season 6, as beautiful as it is, was a failure, and we wanted to try again. So in October of 2020, we got together to create a new game. And in November 2020, we launched Project Inkunzi. Project Inkunzi has more staff. Project Inkunzi started earlier than the classical period, allowing for more history to be run. Project Inkunzi had a vetting system where we vetted out bad players, and Project Inkunzi's starting map was a lot smaller of a region than Season 6, meaning more of the map can be explored, having more big moments of exploration throughout the game, rather than the entire continent being shown at the start. So at the start of Inkunzi, me and Lunu knew we had something. This is the answer to the thing I was talking about in the beginning of this episode. A strong nation RP is the best way to create great simulated history stories about a planet. And not just some stories, literally simulate an entire planet's history. Now, of course, not every single human being's experience will be simulated on this planet, but every nation on the planet will have lore. Every nation will evolve over time. Every nation's borders will move, every nation's leaders will change. Every character that people play will have a story for their own. With this setup, we can literally create thousands of stories in one world. And since we started Inkunzi in November 2020, we are actually coming up on the 1-year anniversary of this world. And after 1 year of running this game, I want to share with you this. I've ran a nation RP for a year. This is what's happened. Now, the game was split up into eras and ages, eras being the longer time spans that multiple ages make up. We started in the ancient era in the tribal age. The tribal age was dominated by a few things, primarily the rise of the AOI, or the Agari Omu Ilum, in the southern continent. The AOI is an empire of mushroom people, so in Inkunzi we did allow for some levels of fantasy, as long as it didn't necessarily affect the mechanics of the game. The AOI would go on to stretch along the entire southern coast of the starting map and be a menace to all they encountered. You also have the rise of some more powers like Piolansk and Artoile in the north, the United Holy Kingdoms in the east, and the struggling region of the Dahe, which produced multiple strong powers. The Dahe is a region in the south that lives alongside a large river valley, akin to Egypt, but seems to have RP that is inspired by China. In the north you have the Orkani, very warlike orc tribes, and the Porian state, a very early superpower of the world. The Fellowship of Baitos formed up, which was a collection of different tribes that were united by a shared religion. And you have the Braga Fanati, blood cult worshipping human sacrificer. The major event of the tribal age was really when the Orkani invaded south into a seemingly minor river valley inhabited by the Eldari. The Eldari formed an alliance with the other Eldari tribes in their area and managed to actually fight off the Orkani. The Orkani had allied themselves to the Porian state, but the Porian state had been unstable at the time, and when the Eldari went back south to defeat the Porians, the entire empire collapsed. The Eldari then was able to build a large, sizable empire and would dominate the West's politics for the coming era. Next in the ancient era we have the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age saw the strength of the AOI and the Fellowship of Baitos rise to very high levels. They attempted to invade the now united Dahe under the Geelong dynasty, which ended up turning into a Bronze Age Vietnam War style situation where the Geelong fought guerrilla warfare against the two invaders, inflicting tens of thousands of casualties to each. There was some struggle over the tribe of Zatoka from Artoile, the Ferdunix, and Brachuria, although Artoile ended up coming in power over the area. The Pialants successfully invaded and subjugated the Swizer people in the north, but the true story of the Bronze Age is when the Eldari Council decided to explore a little bit too far west. Some Eldari explorers crossed some seemingly innocent mountains and discovered a freshly united tribe of horse steppe people called Rekohians. Now, these weren't just any ordinary horse people, they were literally horse people, centaurs. The Rekohian centaurs, freshly united by a warlord named Azulis, decided that they were the kings of the entire world and that they were going to enforce that. Azulis led an invasion force east and started conquering everything in its path. They crushed Eldari armies whenever they encountered them, as well as any small tribal armies that they saw as well. Azulis seemed unstoppable after conquering the entire region of Poria from Eldari, but they were finally defeated at the Battle of the Four Armies, where the Eldari, Dinyan, Kaldari, and Prizlohana armies came together to stop them. Azulis was then chased back over the mountains and left behind him a collection of warlord states ran by Rekohian warlord generals. The Eldari then had to figure out how to recollect this territory from these Rekohian warlords, or else Rekohians may begin to migrate into the area. So the Eldari, the Dinyan, and the Porians decided to create the Vestorian Council. The Vestorians defeated most of the Rekohian warlord states, with exception to Faikiokli, which would later be renamed to Surya. Surya and its then leader, Cruz Khan, would be a very influential force on the world stage. After the Bronze Age, we moved into the Classical Era with the Age of Conquest. In the Age of Conquest, we see the AOI hit its peak of power after it invades and destroys the Fellowship of Baitos. It's also able to, at one point, successfully invade and occupy the entirety of the Dahe, and threatens Brachuria and the entire East. After the Fellowship of Baitos is destroyed, multiple groups of refugees flee the region and create nations in other areas. One of these new nations was Sternhell, created from the Yaroli people who escaped west, and the Caliphate of Al-Andalus, which was a creation of Testafi and Oskatan people that escaped east. Pialansk was renamed to the Fellowship of Yerza when they began idolizing their gods and became a theocracy. And multiple new powers rose up in the west, mainly the Tensalis in the north and the Goblin Direxes in the south. Cruz Khan led a massive invasion of the homeland of Rekolia to try to take it as his own, which created a huge civil war in the region. But Cruz Khan was defeated by the Tensalis, Goblins, and Sternhell when they formed a coalition against him and invaded Rekolia. The Vestorian Council balanced having all of these new powerful neighbors surrounding it, and was trying to remain the premier power of the world. Although by the end of the Age of Conquest it had successfully invaded and destroyed the AOI, invaded and subjugated multiple peoples in the south, and destroyed the Fellowship of Yerza, creating the truly first worldwide empire. We then moved into the Empire Age of the Classical period, which was a fairly short age where the Vestorian Council attempted to stay dominant on the world, which it did until the end, and was only rivaled by the now Caliphate of Al-Andalus, who attempted to unite most of the Baitos world. By the end of the Empire Age, the Caliphate of Al-Andalus and the Vestorian Council would go to war. This war would be so devastating to the world that it would literally induce a dark age on the entire world. But you still had the rise of some new peoples like the Alza and the Kazakuzi in the north, and the Dab and the Ungla in the south. After the Vestorians and Al-Andalus fought their war, the old world died and a new world rose. We leave the Classical era and into the medieval era with the Dark Age. In the Dark Age, we now have an Eastern and Western Vestorian Empire, as well as Al-Andalus being shattered into many pieces. In the Dark Age, the main thing that happened was the now sublime empire of Al-Sholios, a break-off state from Al-Andalus, decided that it wanted to create its own equally strong empire. It began subjugating peoples and invading north, and would later decentralize its empire and create the empire of Al-Bythonia. Al-Bythonia would go on to fight the longest war in Inkunzi's history for roughly 140 years against Al-Albaqaith, another break-off state from Al-Andalus. And in the west you have the again rise of the Rekohlians. At first you had Kolia's and Nojus's hordes who were rivals against each other. Kolis would slowly win out over Nojus, and to get revenge against the goblins for invading and raiding their lands back in the times of Cruz Khan, Kolis paid a mercenary company to go raid Direx's Black Mountain, the northern goblin kingdom. This raid would end up going a little bit too well, where the leader of this mercenary company, Jogalia, would actually end up fully taking Black Mountain and declared his own Rekohlian kingdom there. He later became upset with how Kolis and Nojus were leading the Rekohlian realm, so he went and destroyed Nojus and Kolis and united the Rekohlian realm under himself, creating the new kingdom of Jogalidia. Jogal now wanted to finish what Azulis had started hundreds of years ago by invading Vestoria once again. He built a navy and crossed the Inner Sea, which the Vestorians had not anticipated, and sacked the capital and killed the entire Vestorian royal family. Vestoria would then collapse into a collection of warlord states. In the High Middle Age, you had the rise of the Wagrin Khanate in the north, as well as Bythonia in the east breaking up with the reformation of Al-Andalus. Now only the northern people with the Kazakuzi and Al-Andalus were in charge of Bythonia. You have the again rise and fall of the Mushrooms, who tried to recreate the AOI, who successfully invaded most of their neighbors, retook over the entire Dahe, invaded the Zwaze in the south, and dealt multiple defeats to Al-Andalus, until they were finally defeated and invaded by pretty much all of their neighbors. In the High Middle Age, you have the rise of the Dark Helghast Empire out of Helghast Island, and you have the establishment of the Valor Empire in the west, which became the dominant western force. In the far north of the west, you also have the rise of Great Melkia, who became the only real competitor to Valor. And at the end of High Middle, we introduced the Ganeta. The Ganeta were born out of a Nat 1 world event, where we decided to make the Sunset Invasion real on the players. The Ganeta invaded multiple coastlines, basically demanding people be subjugated for slavery to create and grow food for them. Many of the areas that the Ganeta would take over would be ethnically replaced by Ganeta, until at the end of the High Middle Age, they finally collapsed, and all of their areas that they conquered became independent Ganeta kingdoms. In Old Vestoria, you have the civil wars to reunify Vestoria. You have the Landlass Palmer people creating a very strong kingdom for a short time. You have Cerveria, led by the descendants of Cruz Khan. And you have Seaside, an Eldari kingdom led out of the city of Seaside, which would slowly win out over Cerveria and the Landlass kingdom. In the late Middle Age, Vestoria is reunited fully under the Seaside dynasty as the domain of the Westarians, and Artois reaches its fullest strength, creating the Commonwealth of Silest, which is a union between the Artois and the Piolansk. Al-Andalus reaches again a very powerful state, and the Wagrin kingdom is reunited after a brief collapse. The Dahe also finally reunites under an independent dynasty for the first time in hundreds of years, and goes to invade multiple other regions of the world, creating the first true Dahe empire. And to close off the medieval era, Bythonia, which was the first major thing to happen in the medieval era, was dissolved by the Kazakuzi in the north. And that, my friends, takes us to today. We have left the medieval era and we have entered the early modern era. I guess you're playing EU4 and you've just started a new game. We've reached the point where much of the rest of the map is going to start being revealed soon, and there are plenty of places in the map to play as right now. If you liked this video and you're interested in playing the game, check out the Discord link in the description. It is a good lot of fun, and if you enjoy RPing, and if you enjoy Nation RP, I'm sure you will love this world. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and you will see many more videos on this topic in the future. If you liked, make sure to like, favorite, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next time. Peace.